Okay, 12 o'clock rock. Here we are. Think Tech Hawaii, and we're doing Aloha United Way. That is Aloha United We Stand at 12 o'clock every Thursday. And with us, we have special guests. Norm Baker at the far end. He's the COO of Aloha United Way. Thank you for joining us, Norm.
Thank you for having us.
We are
Jay.
delighted. In fact, you can sleep here.
Oh, good. I'll pay the parking.
I hope so. But okay, and Suzanne Skjold from Hawaii Literacy. You've been on the show before. Welcome.
I have. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah. So we're doing this kind of Aloha United Way 101. Okay. We're trying to explore exactly how it works and the various impact areas. And today's impact area we're going to talk about from the vantage of Aloha United Way is education. Of course, education is, top priority for everyone. And I was telling you before the show that the Energy Policy Forum, with which I am associated, sent a survey out to its members and beyond to ask them about what areas in government, had the highest priority, rank the areas in government. And there were several areas that, were problem areas. Education was number one. So it's not only the reality, in this case, the people actually understand it. Mm-hmm. The reality, it's like in focus, education is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. So tell us why Aloha United Way, Norm, feels that education is one of its primary missions.
Well, we also have done an awful lot of surveying, and we go back to the community all the time and say, what matters? What is the things that need work, that are really the challenges? And education has, for the last 11 years now, been right at the top, just as you indicated. The reason we focus so much on it, and it's our probably our highest funded impact area. The reason we focus so heavily on it is because we think it's the ultimate prevention strategy. We think that all of the work on poverty prevention and our other impact areas, it's all very, very important, but we also realize that if we don't start now and work with the folk, our young ones that are going through school, and make sure that they graduate ready to enter the economy and ready to have a nice, stable life, that we're just going to be facing these problems year after year after year. So we really do want to focus on prevention, and we think education is the first place that prevention starts.
It's interesting. I think there's two parts to that. One is you want people to be educated so they can get a decent job and have decent earnings. Okay, I mean that's easy. That's real basic. But the other is education in life. Education how to prevent bad things from happening to you, leading a life that will not result in, hopefully too many disasters. Mm-hmm. Knowing how to operate at the grocery store, knowing how to deal with your medicines, knowing how to deal with government. All these little silly things that you have to do to stay alive in a society. And so if you're not educated, these become big problems. And let me add, it's very interesting. In Kealakea High School in Kona, okay, they have classes for parents. And these are Micronesian families, and the parents don't know how to do at the grocery store. They don't know how to deal with government. They don't know how to, handle drugs and prescriptions and, basic things in the household. They just don't know. So the school, a guy named Murakami there, he's a visionary principal. That sounds like a duplication. A vision, but he is the principal and he's visionary. He organized this, and so these kids bring in their parents, and their parents learn how to live in our society. So anyway, I see it as there's two parts to education. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great point you make, because just something is we all have to do, filling out tax forms. Every year we have to go through that process. Can you imagine somebody coming here from Micronesia and having to take on that task just because they've gotten a job? How would you navigate those waters? I mean, it's a very, very difficult process. Yeah. I mean, we don't get it right. We've been here for way too many years, right?
I wish I could say, speak for yourself.
So you're right. It's not just basic education. That's obviously the foundation for everything. But it's that, how do you get by in the world that we live in today? And it changes so darn much and so fast
Yeah.
that we just have to keep up with all of it, you know?
And if you're not educated and you don't keep up with it, the family pays, a serious price.
Yeah.
It means that you're inefficient. It means that other things will tend to bite you. It means that you're just not, leading an efficient family life.
Yeah.
And then bad things happen.
What we have learned too, it's not so much the bad things happen, is that people make choices, and the choices they make when presented the situation are totally logical, completely common sense way to approach something, and yet it is a decision that is going to lead them to a place that is not really good in their lives.
Yeah.
And they're just living day to day and doing whatever they need to do to keep functioning.
Yeah, that's maybe a third thing. A third thing, making life choices. And education will help you make life choices.
Sure.
Okay, I sure agree. You agree, Suzanne?
Absolutely.
I knew she'd say that. So how does Aloha United Way create an educated person in the community so as to avoid, the alternative life?
Well, first of all, it's not Aloha United Way that does it. It's the community that has to pick this up. We don't do that type of work. We help others deliver that type of work, Suzanne's agency being a primary example. But it's all the community that has to join in and make these decisions and make these efforts. If it's the nonprofit world that's trying to do it, that's not going to work. It's not eventually going to pay off. Eventually, we have to have government, we have to have business, we have to have the nonprofits all come together and say, it's unacceptable that we have kids graduating from high school that can't read and write and can't get by in this world,
Or not even graduating.
or not even graduating, or truly graduating anyway, and say that's unacceptable to us, and we're going to make the change. And then, Aloha United Way is one of many, many organizations that's trying to lead the charge to make sure that we make the changes that we need to make.
Yeah. So why did you ask Suzanne to come down?
Well, actually, you mentioned earlier, education is a broad area, and there's multiple difficulties that folks in the community encounter when they're trying to work on education for their children. We never think about things like this, but think about how difficult the transportation issue is for someone that's homeless. Or think about how difficult nutrition.
You don't have to be homeless to have trouble with the transportation.
That's very true too. But so there's multiple pieces of this education problem that we need to deal with. And Aloha United Way, through a group of volunteers that we call an Impact Council, have identified 3 different areas that we think are where we can make the biggest bang for the dollars that we're going to invest. One of them is in preschool, early childhood development, and making sure that children, their minds and their emotional health is growing at the appropriate rate. Another one is literacy. And then the third area that we're focusing on is kids transitioning from middle school through high school, because that's apparently the biggest dropout occurs from 8th grade going into 9th grade.
That's where motivation really makes a difference.
Exactly. And so Suzanne represents one of the agencies that works on the literacy piece for us. And so,
Well, I have the feeling that literacy is directly joined at the hip with education, because you can't be educated without reading.
It's really the fundamental piece of education. If we don't teach reading and writing to our keiki, none of the rest of the pieces that we want to see, educated workforce, STEM issues, all the other pieces, daily living and skills, going grocery shopping, all those things really require you to be able to pick up something and read it. And that's where we come in. That's for us the base mission, and then we move on from there.
Okay, well, let's look at when you come in, what do you find in this community? In the state of Hawaii, what do you find in literacy?
In terms of statistics, we are just slightly below national averages. So about 1 in 6 adults in Hawaii are not able to read and write at a functional level, which means those examples that you gave, going grocery shopping, reading medicine bottles. Most of the adults that we do work with can read a few words, they can write their name, so they're not completely illiterate. With the children, it generally means that they are significantly below grade level. Many of the children that we work with that are in public housing or are coming to us from homeless shelters are 3, 4, sometimes even 5 grades below where they should be. And so there's a very short period of time to be able to catch them up so that they can continue to learn with their classmates.
There's one other thing, is that we live in a time when our community, the world, has at its fingertips, has the ability to do research. And I mean, it's never been like that before. When I was a kid and I would ask my mother a question, she would say, call the New York Times. And indeed, in New York, there was Lackawanna 41000, I'm telling you, I can't remember this. If you asked me tomorrow, I wouldn't remember. Lackawanna 41000 was the information number at the New York Times. And you could call them day and night, in the middle of the night you could call them. And there would be these guys with green eye shades and horn-rimmed glasses. And you would say, you know, what's the population of Ceylon? They called it Ceylon in those days. And the guy would tell you right away. That kind of research has morphed into the internet, where you don't have to call him. There is no Lackawanna 41000. You can find, you know, the answer to any question. And that could include, you know, I got a pain in my Zorch. I need to know what the problem is. So I get on the internet and I look up Zorch, and I get the answer, or at least I get a good idea about what it is and what to do, and I get some direction on life problems. If you can't read, that's not a possibility for you.
If you can't read, you really can't access information. And so that gap of the digital gap, technology gap, and knowledge gap all grow based on people who are literate and have the access to education, and people who struggle to read and write and have not had that chance to become educated.
So it's another kind of disparity.
Absolutely.
And it
Absolutely.
leads
to all the
to
rest
still
of
other
the ones that we
types
don't
of
want to
disparity.
see. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well that's a worthy function for Aloha United Way to do that.
Absolutely.
Have Suzanne do that. How successful are you in stamping out illiteracy?
We are, right now, quite honestly, still a drop in the bucket. The families that we work with about 2,500 children each year and about 500 adults. And with that population, we make great progress. So we are taking kids who are very, very basic readers, helping them build their vocabulary, teaching them reading strategies, something even as simple as giving them access to books. Many of the children that we work with don't even have books in the home. But a book alone is not enough. They need an adult to help them and encourage them, and so our staff and volunteers provide that as well. So with the children that we work with, absolutely, I think we're making great progress. If you look at the numbers statewide, you'll know that 3,000 people is not nearly enough of all the folks who need help. Probably about 150,000 adults alone in the state.
Yeah.
And we know from graduation rates and looking at students who aren't reading at proficient levels in public schools that there's, you know, tens of thousands of children out there who need this kind of help.
Your comments flood my mind with questions.
Oh dear.
Sorry. We're going to take a short break and then we'll organize them.
Sounds great.
That's Suzanne Skjold, and Norm Baker will be right back.
Aloha, my name is Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I'm the host of Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. We air live on the internet and also on Oceanic Channel 16. I'd invite you to come for a fresh new show every Tuesday from 12 to 1 o'clock. I try to bring on guests that give us a different viewpoint on aspects of sustainability in Hawaii, as well as trying to unpack some of the difficult concepts of measuring and achieving sustainability, particularly with regard to sustainable economic growth and prosperity in Hawaii. Please join us every Tuesday from 12 to 1 p.m. Mahalo, aloha.
Aloha, I'm Carlos Juarez, host of Global Connections, and I want to invite you to come join us. We cover a range of global issues. We bring a lot of expert opinion, a lot of issues, whether they're contemporary events happening in the world or maybe looking at things from a more historical perspective. Global issues, very important for us to understand in this globally interconnected world. Join us here on Global Connections.
Bingo, we're back. We're here with Norm Baker and Suzanne Skjold, talking about the first impact area, education. And it's really so important. Yeah.
Absolutely critical.
So anyway, so you made, you gave us a little précis about how it works, but it strikes me, and you said, this is what struck me last, the schools, have kids who can't read.
Yes.
And back in the old days, the schools would teach kids to read. What happened?
I think there's a lot of things that have happened. The schools are being asked to do much more than they ever were in past decades, and certainly the teachers are, from my conversations with other teachers, are fairly overwhelmed. The amount of reporting they're now required to do, professional development, the number of different things they're expected to be experts in. And then I feel that many children are coming to school with a lot more needs than they did in past decades. You know, in the past, there was maybe usually a mom at home, there was somebody taking care of them, the lunch was packed, the breakfast was provided, the children had a place to go home to. And so I think
That's not
now,
always the case.
that's not the case now. There's families there who are struggling. Mom and dad are working 2 jobs. They have maybe not the skills or the time to be able to do those things for their children. And the school's being asked to pick up the slack and then asked why can't they do it all alone? And my hope for the future is that like Norm mentioned earlier, that the government, the DOE, the school system will start to work in much more meaningful ways with various nonprofits, and that will collectively, as a community, feel like it's everyone's job to get involved and help educate our students, because we all know that's crucial for our future.
Yeah, and you're not, when you talk about this program, you're not building PhDs who are going to go to the moon.
Well, we hope to.
Well, maybe now wouldn't that be gratifying? Eh?
That would be amazing.
Among some of your beneficiaries, there would be somebody who does that. But you're building, people who can live their lives.
Absolutely.
Who won't be a burden on society. And the operative word, I'm getting to know your secrets, Norm. The operative word, as Suzanne mentions, family.
Exactly.
Because a community has to have families.
But it's more than just family as we think of family, mom, dad, and a couple kids. It's the whole community wrapping around that family and saying, okay, both of these parents have to work today, but there's somebody next door that's there, and the kids know that they can network with that person and say, hey, look, this is what's going on in my life. We hear so often kids, they don't even know who to go to when something has gone wrong in their lives. They freeze, basically, and just endure. And, we can't have that. We have to have a broader community wrap. Who is it that said, it takes a community to raise a child? Well, it certainly is worse now, or it's more necessary now than it was whenever that was said first,
Yeah, well, you are the family. And loco parentis. That's the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
Because the family in the nuclear age isn't so much a family anymore for all the reasons you mentioned, Suzanne. And now we, the community, the village,
Mm-hmm.
we have to step in and be the family. We have to take care of that child,
Mm-hmm.
which is not easy because we're not in the household.
Right.
And so one of the questions, is how do you know when Johnny can't read? You're not going to catch him on the street. How do you know?
No, we definitely don't grab children on the street and test them. We have
You, into the room.
we have set up, so the way that our youth programs work is they're site-based and bookmobile-based, and we have selected those locations intentionally to be in places where we know there's high need. So high immigrant population, high poverty, places where we know children are unlikely to be getting read to and getting those early development skills that they'll need to succeed in school. And it's all voluntary, so the children choose to come, which to me really demonstrates that in these communities that some people maybe give up on, there's literally thousands of children who are eager to learn to read, who want to do well in school, who...
Do they understand the connection?
I think they do, and if they don't, our staff is there to remind them gently each day of how important reading is.
What do you say to them?
We really try to make it fun. So most of the children early on...
That must be...
early...
This is for you, Norm. I was only kidding.
So when the children come in, basically we try to make it fun. We create an environment that feels a little different than school. So it's much louder than what you might think of as traditional libraries. They can take out books for free. There's no barriers to access. So there's no late book fees. If they lose a book, they can still get more. There's activities. There's also really practical things like homework help, which parents tell us is the reason they most value the libraries and bookmobile, because they know they cannot help their children with that specific task. And so I think really it's just for me, perhaps the most important thing is really the caring staff and volunteers. Like Norm was saying, many of these children don't have the strongest support networks, particularly around the area of education and learning. And we provide people who are both experts in literacy, they know how to teach reading, and we train over 320 volunteers each year to assist with that. So that gives us the one-to-one attention, that relationship, and the encouragement for a child who's maybe coming from a family where there has not been a lot of people completing school to say, you can do this, you should do this, here's why it'll help, and to know that child well enough to know what their future goals are. If a child at 8 years old says, I want to be a doctor, do they know that means they better do good in science, and they better learn to read very well, and they're going to need to go to college and then some.
It also means a BMW.
That comes
They want
after
a
the schooling.
BMW, learn to read, get a BMW.
If Aloha wants to fund
Yeah.
that, we can consider
There you
that as a
go.
program.
Okay, we got a tweet here. Why does tech access matter for kids learning to read? There's other questions. I mean, there's multiple questions involved in that, but let's take a whack at it. What do you think, Suzanne?
Sure. I think we're kind of going back to the disparities that we talked about earlier with children who are from low-income situations and in the schools that are maybe struggling and don't have the most resources. In addition to not having books, they also don't have the same access to technology. And so in our programs, we really apply a both philosophy. We encourage books. We feel like kids do love books. The idea that the book is going away is false in my mind. But we also have Kindles. We have, I think, over 50 Kindles in our programs now that are loaded with ebooks, and there's some fantastic educational applications out there that kids can get on and independently play games that help them with sounds and phonetics and all the other literacy building activities. That said, I don't believe you can put a child next to a computer and expect that child to become a reader. There's also an adult element, a individualized element of helping that child find the right level, know how to use the technology, especially if they're from a family where it's not available, and making sure it's matched appropriately, that what you're giving them on the computer is both fun for them, is accessible for them, and
Life
is
can
educational.
be fun. Why not make it fun?
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the great benefits of including the technology. The kids are excited about it, and there's unprecedented number of tools that can help children build skills on their own level, give them encouragement, correct them, lots of sounds and bells and whistles, and so it really does bring in another way to teach literacy, often when the children aren't even aware they're being taught. So absolutely essential to programs. I think more attention needs to be given to how to use technology effectively within education, both in the school system and in programs
But
like
you have
ours.
to have a delivery system, and it has to be based on a cloth mother.
Yes. Yes.
Remember cloth mother.
What struck me as we were listening to Suzanne is there are people out there that want to help. There are people, a lot of people in the community that want to be able to say, boy, that is what she's talking about is so, so important. I want to be able to help. And shamelessly, I will plug Aloha United Way. It is such an easy way for somebody to help an organization like Hawaii Literacy in the workplace. All that you have to do is commit $1 a week, $1 a paycheck, $2 a paycheck. Everybody in the community can afford to give a little, and if everybody gives a little, at the end we wind up with a substantial amount of money that we can fund programs just like Hawaii Literacy. And everybody out there ought to be thinking, how do I help? Here's one way you can do it.
And I'd like to add that there's no way we could do what we do without Aloha United Way. The way that they give money, the thoughtfulness of their committees and how to allocate, how to ensure that what we're doing is really having an impact, and then giving us the freedom to use the money in the way that whether we need an extra staff person or a volunteer training or additional Kindles, that they trust that we are the literacy experts and we will use that money for the greatest impact. And then, of course, we report back to them. But they're just such an essential partner for ourselves and I think over 300 other nonprofits now. So
342,
we're
by the
truly,
way.
truly lucky to have them.
Jay, remember, 342 is terrific.
It's a magic number.
Yeah.
That number is the number of charities that Aloha United Way gives to, so that's really something. It strikes me, though, a couple of things, a couple of reactions. One is, you see it from the point of view of literacy and your charity, your nonprofit, your mission in life. What I really like about Aloha United Way is that they see it from the community point of view, and they make those priorities. They decide education and and poverty prevention and all that. They're holding in their hands the whole community. Okay, which goes to my question to you, provoked by your comment a minute ago, Norm, and that is: so I'm in the workplace. Somebody comes around, wants $1 from me. Why? What does it do? I'm being the Grinch now.
Sure.
What does it do for me?
Well, if you've just heard what
That's
Susan-
not an easy question, and yet it is also a very easy question.
Yeah. If what you heard from Suzanne a few minutes ago did not stir you to want to help, then it ain't going to do anything for you. But if it did kindle in you, that's really important. That is something that I really want to contribute to. I can't give $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 like some folks can, but I can give $1 a paycheck. Aloha United Way provides philanthropy for the everyday person. That's our role in life, is to enable everybody in the community, regardless of how much you can give, but to be able to give back. And so, and honestly, there's several different ways it can be done. We've talked about on earlier shows, Jay, we accept designations directly to Hawaii Literacy. So if you want to support Suzanne's programs, all you've got to do is fill in the form and the money will go directly to them. And 100% of those dollars, by the way, go to them. But suppose you say, well, you know, literacy is important, but this transition from middle school to high school is also really important. We give people the opportunity to designate their dollars to the education area. So they can designate, and it will cover right now.
Areas too.
Exactly,
So it's
yeah.
not only Hawaii literacy, it's education in
It's
general.
all
Lots
the-
of options.
Right, in our education area, we fund about 22 different agencies, and when you designate to education, the money is going to be split up between all 22
It's like
of them.
buying a basket of stocks.
Exactly, yeah, a mutual fund. We're the mutual fund of the philanthropy world.
Well, I was going to answer the question I put to you
Okay.
myself this way. I live in the community.
Mhm.
If I don't participate in philanthropy, I'm in trouble because the community suffers by the lack of the services that you provide. And then the community is coming down. I mean, you know, if we didn't have anybody literate who is, you know, now illiterate, I mean, it's on the road to Mad Max at Thunderdome. We have to have a civilized, literate community, and we all benefit by that. If you want to have it the other way, it's not a good scenario.
As I said earlier, it's the community that has to say that what is going on in our education system right now is unacceptable and we want it to change. And one way of doing that would be to fund agencies like Suzanne's through Aloha United Way, because we're sending that very message that literacy, 1 in 6 adults illiterate in Hawaii, that should be setting off red flags and alarms and all of that in everybody's mind, because it eventually it's all going to cost us anyway. At the back end of this, we're going to wind up paying for those folks because they're not going to be able to support
And
themselves.
that is, it's 1,000 cuts.
Multiples.
Yeah, because the community can't tolerate 1,000 cuts. So where else do you get your money? Is Aloha United Way the only place?
They are not, but they're one of our most significant funders, and we've been an Aloha United Way agency since 1971, so crucial to what we do. We also are very blessed to receive funding from some of the family foundations in Hawaii, community foundation. We also do an annual fundraiser, and we rely on individual donations. So we have numerous, people who just in December sent us year-end donations, people who give to us throughout the year. We recently tried to do a Kindle drive and had people generously donate both Kindles or send checks to let us buy Kindles.
Cool.
So we
That's
really have a
perfect.
wide base of support and many volunteers, hundreds of volunteers who, collectively provide several $100,000 worth of time to us. So
Yeah.
we are very community-based, very volunteer-based, and
How can I volunteer to help you? How can I volunteer to come down and show people how to read or
the
help
easiest
them
way,
with the Kindle?
yeah, we would love to have you. The easiest way is to go to hawaiiliteracy.org, and we have a volunteer online form, very short, sweet, fill it out. Let us know which programs or opportunities you're interested in, and we will have somebody contact you and get you started. We provide training if you select something that needs training, or if you prefer to just come sort books or work in a PR committee, we can accommodate that too. About 12 different ways that volunteers can get involved right now.
Talk about gratification, It's like when you're a kid who's illiterate and, had the benefit of services, you need the cloth mother. But when you're an adult and maybe you don't have kids at home, maybe you want to give to the community and you have a chance to rub shoulders with this kid. Oh, that's gratification too. So when you bring the two parts of the equation together, you have magic happening on both sides.
Absolutely. It's all about that community and relationship where you get to know somebody you would not have maybe connected with otherwise, and you help them, but then in unexpected ways they also help you. And many of our volunteers have said that teaching someone to read is one of the most rewarding things they've ever done in their life. So I think it's really a two-way street of helping in that community spirit.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you right after this break whether the picture that Suzanne is describing is sort of the general the general narrative of the way things work in the nonprofit community that you touch, whether it is different in some way, and how we can, what we can learn from that, and what we can do to expand it, to more people, more benefits. One short break. That's Norm Baker. He's the COO of Aloha United Way, and Suzanne Skjold with Hawaii Literacy. Here on Aloha United We Stand. We'll be right back. You'll see, I mean it.
Aloha, my name is Justina Spiritu, and I'm the co-host of Hawaii Farmers Series. This is my co-host, Matthew Johnson, and you can catch us every Thursday at 4 p.m. at thinktechhawaii.com. What do we talk about, Matt?
So on Hawaii Farmers Series, we're going to be bringing on the farmers and also supporter of farmers, including restaurants, caterers, as well as government supporters and nonprofits to hear their background stories and understanding our local ag community just a little bit better.
Yeah, essentially there's a lot more that goes into farming and the local food community beyond just producing the food. And we want to feature and get the background story on all these folks and see how we all work together as a community. So join us every Thursday. Aloha.
Okay, we're back, like MacArthur. Okay, so Norm, is Suzanne's case, the standard among your beneficiaries?
Unfortunately, I think it is. And I say unfortunately because if you listened really carefully to what Suzanne was saying, she probably spends 3/4 of her time working on funding sources in order to keep the organization afloat.
Yeah.
And if you think about it for a minute, is that what we really want the leaders of our nonprofits doing, is out there trying to scrape together the money to keep the organization open? And once again, there's many different sources of funding, but not most of it, a lot of it comes with an awful lot of strings attached. And
What's a string?
They'll say, for instance, this can only be used in this particular program and with these particular.
And try to control your program.
Exactly, and it makes it very, very difficult when the folks that are in the trenches doing the work, and they know exactly what needs to be provided to help this child move from here to there, but they can't do that because the funding source says, no, that's not what we want you to do. So we as funders need to learn that trying to dictate to the nonprofits how to spend the money that we are making available to them, what we're basically saying is we don't trust them to do their work. And we have taken the exact opposite tack, and we have moved totally away from specifying how the dollars ought to be spent. We say to the nonprofits, we understand that you're in the front lines, you're doing this work, you understand how the dollars need to be spent, please do that. However, here's what we want delivered at the back end. These are the outcomes that we expect to see from that dollar.
You're looking for outcomes.
Exactly.
But the actual engagement, that belongs to the charity.
Exactly. I mean, I would never begin to tell Suzanne how to teach somebody to read, and I would hope that she would never begin to tell me how to do my work, right? And yet there are funders out there that think that that's how it ought to be done. It's hard. Everybody's got their rationale for why they're doing it. The other piece of this, I think, that is really important is community involvement. How do we, let me a shout out to Barnes & Noble. Every year, Barnes & Noble does a book drive for us. And the books this year, I think, was a little over 6,000 books that were donated by customers going through. So they said, yeah, I'll buy an extra book and give it to 6,000 of them we got this year. And of course, Hawaii Literacy gets a major piece of it. We actually distributed them to about 7 different agencies that are doing different kinds of literacy work. But that's a beautiful example, I think, of the business community saying there are things that we can do that don't require us just to write a check. There's ways that we can help somebody like Hawaii Literacy deliver a service that is really, really critical. And oh, by the way, it's going to help us, because people that read books buy books, and if you're going to buy them, Barnes & Noble is a great place to buy them.
Win-win-win.
Exactly. There's a lot of win-wins like that if everybody thinks about how helping the community is actually going to help me.
Yeah. You had something to add, though. I know you did.
Well, going back to what Norm said about the reporting, it's really exciting for us to work with Aloha United Way because first the funding comes, most grants come to us as 1 year. And if you're trying to create a new program or really evaluate your program and improve it, 1 year is not a ton of time to show results in literacy. Our grants with Aloha United Way are 3 years, so we've had a chance to go through our first 2 six-month reports and say what's worked, what can we do better, and make some improvements, and then be able to honestly say to Aloha United Way, hey, we've made some changes and here's why, and they're like, fantastic, not you've broken the agreement. and then, in addition that we do, the reporting is very stringent. We went through a long process to become funded with them, and however, what we report on is how do we know children are learning how to read, how many kids have come through our program, what have we provided, why did we choose to do that, and not last July, how many pencils did you buy? And that wasn't in the budget, so since you didn't budget for pencils, you can't expense for pencils. And that actually still happens in some grants, which you can imagine it's difficult for our staff, it's defeating because we can't have the things that we need. And it also sort of, I think the level of mistrust that shows in what we're doing in the community is difficult. So having partners like Aloha United Way and some of the other family foundations who've gone to this model of outcomes as opposed to individual lines and expenses, I think is really, it helps us do much more effective work. And I hope that's where more people in the community
Well,
will follow.
the Grinches want to know the outcomes. If you don't tell him, he can't tell me.
Yeah.
I need to know.
From Aloha United Way's perspective, it's not so much that we don't believe or trust that they're going to deliver what they say, it's that we have to complete the loop. Because we have a donor that says their work is important and I'm going to give them dollars to do that, then we have to go back to that donor eventually and say, here's what you accomplished with the dollars that you sent to Hawaii Literacy. Then that donor says, I see what I have accomplished. It kind of answers the question you asked earlier on, where why would somebody want to participate in this? Well, if they're concerned about this problem and we are able to provide feedback on exactly what their donation accomplished, then they're going to continue to help.
Okay, we have 3 or 4 minutes left, and I want to sort of expand this a little bit and look on a broad basis. Yes, we have a problem in education. We've agreed that that reading really helps education, and that with a cloth mother, computer can help reading and all that. We've learned a lot about it. But what about the rest of the charities to deal with this particular impact area? Are there other ones? How do they work? Who are they?
Oh, there's, like I said, we have about 20 that we're funding in this area. It runs the gamut from literacy programs to the ones that are doing the developmental screenings. Others are delivering programs around helping, as I said, the middle school children pass through and become good high school students. Lots and lots of...
You track them through school.
Yes.
It's more than just prepare them for school, it's tracking them right on through.
Right, and it's kind of identifying when someone has a problem and is not going to succeed. Let's intervene now rather than wait until they're drop out in the 11th grade or something and say, oh, this is not acceptable. Now we're going to have to go out and work with them even more. So it's kind of early identification of the problems and then work from there.
Intervention whenever it's necessary.
Exactly.
It strikes me this is complicated because you say we are going to stamp out illiteracy. We're gonna stamp out ignorance. We're gonna educate our community on things that make it a better community. That will make it a better community. And then you got to figure out how you do that. And I can imagine your groups. Sitting, I forget what you call it. What do you call it?
Impact councils.
Impact Council, which are volunteers.
Right.
And they're numerous, and they're very dedicated. They would have that question in front of them. They have to reach out into their own, understanding of the community, figure out where the incidences are, then where the charities are that would complement Suzanne's charity. I just want to tell you, I'm a very, very busy person here. Either that or you are. So my question is, how does that function at the council level?
Well, as I said, we have these councils. Each one is probably 15 to 20 volunteers, and they're made up of basically 3 different groups of people. We have real subject matter experts. So for instance, the Education Council has, the chair is actually the former Deputy Superintendent of DOE. We have folks on there from the Head Start, Healthy Start programs. We have folks on there from the P20 program down at UH. Then we have, we've made an intentional effort to bring on the 25 to 45-year-old group, the millennials or whatever we're calling them these days, because we recognize that they're the folks that are going to be running the community here in a few more years, and we need their voice. And then we have just folks like yourself from the community who say, hey, you know what, I really want to be a part of this. They spend literally the years, every 3 years as we go through the funding process, they spend literally 100, 150 hours each in reviewing applications, deciding what should be funded, and monitoring what Suzanne and her group, for instance, have provided as far as outcomes.
So Suzanne, what would you referred to this en passant earlier, but what would you do other than what you have described to stamp out illiteracy in the state of Hawaii? What steps would you take to raise the effort?
I think for me, there'd be two places that I would start. One would be with groups like Aloha United Way and the nonprofits that work with them to create much more meaningful connections with the Department of Education, breaking down some barriers around data and identifying those children earlier so that we can meaningfully track them, especially if parents are willing to allow that information to be shared. I think that that's one area that we could really start to find the children who are not going to succeed and give them the help they need outside of school, because we recognize that teachers cannot do this all themselves, and there are other resources there that if we were working together, I think we could have real impact for those tens of thousands of children we know are not being served right now. The second area I'd say is that we need to do a lot more around parent, maybe accountability might be a strong word, but even if a parent is not able to teach their child how to read or doesn't have a lot of money to buy them things, that they are taking steps to ensure their child is getting their basic needs met, because that also can't be something that the Department of Education is solely responsible for. So I think for me, it's those two areas, and that gets back to what Norm was saying about community, that it's the parents, it's the nonprofits, it's people like you who donate, it's the Department of Education, our government, our elected officials, everyone coming together and saying that education is crucial and we all need to do something now.
We all have a benefit out of it. What I hear you saying about the schools is it's not easy to figure out who in the school needs help. And you have to have a better way, do you think? Is that what you're saying? To identify the students that need help. And sometimes you can't. But it's possible that you could.
Absolutely. I think now it's really a matter of self-selection, that people come to nonprofits looking for help, or a teacher may take the initiative and refer a child, but there isn't sort of a systemic partnership where there's all these things going on after school and on weekends, and we have literacy tutors and programs and public housing and homeless shelters. We work with the kids that are creating the drag on the statistics from the DOE. We work with the children who are really at risk. And if we could work together, and not just myself, all sorts of nonprofits around the island could find a way to better support what the schools want, what we want, the same goals, I think that there could be some really amazing outcomes for the children and for our community, much more quickly than we can do it ourselves, or that the DOE could do it on their own too.
You're terrific. She's terrific.
Undoubtedly.
Okay, Norm, close. What would you like to leave as a message?
I think what Suzanne just alluded to is really one of our underlying foundational problems in the community. We are not very good at sharing data about what's going on. And it is particularly evident in the early childhood world. When we have many systems that identify that a child is likely not to succeed even before kindergarten, and yet that information doesn't flow to DOE adequately. It doesn't flow to other providers who could step in. We have to have a way of monitoring each of the children that we're going to try to take care of, and make sure that when the flag comes up on that child, we have a way of passing that along so that everybody in the system understands that this is something that requires special attention, and it doesn't exist today.
Have to fix that.
Yeah.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, as they used to say. Thank you very much, Norm Baker. Thank you, Suzanne Skjold.
Thank you, our pleasure.
Really appreciate you guys coming down. You
Great
guys are
being
great.
here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't stop for a minute. Yeah.
We will not.
Promise.
Aloha.
Hello.